I was driving alone on a stretch of highway I had taken dozens of times before, heading back from a weekend trip. The road cut through farmland and patches of pine forest. Nothing remarkable, just the usual winding curves and long, straight stretches. It was late afternoon, and the sun had dipped low behind clouds, casting long shadows across the asphalt. I could see my own reflection in the side mirror, pale and tired, and I realized I'd been gripping the steering wheel longer than I intended, eyes focused on the lines on the road. The radio had gone silent hours earlier, leaving only the hum of the engine and the occasional bump of the tires over cracks in the pavement. I thought about stopping for gas at the next station, but none appeared, and the next town was still miles away. The sky had grown heavier, clouds thickening, and the air felt colder, though it was late September, not yet winter. My windows were cracked, enough to let a thin breeze through, carrying the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves. After an hour, I noticed something odd. The road ahead seemed narrower than it should have been, the lines on the asphalt faint, the shoulder overgrown. I blinked, thinking my eyes were playing tricks after hours of driving. The GPS confirmed I was still on the highway, but the map showed a road curving in a way I didn't remember. I slowed down and checked the rearview mirror, half expecting another car to appear, but there was nothing behind me. No lights, no movement. The forest grew thicker along the roadside, the trees pressing closer, their branches twisting over the asphalt. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, though the light was consistent with the setting sun. I drove slower, trying to keep my mind focused on the road, but every bend revealed the same dense trees, the same narrow shoulder, and no signs of civilization. It wasn't dark yet, but the world had the feeling of night. Then I saw it, a car park along the side, doors open, lights on inside. I slowed, thinking someone might need help. As I passed, the car looked normal, clean, not abandoned. There was no movement, no one visible, but the engine idled softly, humming like it was alive. I glanced in the rearview mirror again, and the car was gone. I checked the side mirror, the lane, everything around me. There was nothing there, not even tire tracks. I tried to focus on the road. The GPS recalculated at the next curve, but instead of guiding me to the next town, it directed me back along the same stretch I had just driven. I slowed, testing the theory, and after a few minutes I realized I was circling. The same trees, the same faint cracks in the asphalt, the same narrow shoulder. I tried to take the next exit, but it didn't appear. The map offered a loop, a circle that shouldn't exist, and I could not break out of it. Hours passed. The sun disappeared behind the clouds, and the sky turned gray, then nearly black. Headlights revealed the road ahead in strips, illuminating the same trees, the same rough asphalt. I stopped at one point to stretch, parking on the shoulder. My car felt heavier, the air thick. The smell of damp soil and leaves intensified. I got out, walked a few steps, and realized the forest was unervingly still. No wind moved the branches, no birds or insects. Even distant traffic on the highway behind the trees was gone, swallowed by the shadows. I got back in the car and drove. I started marking the road in my mind, trying to notice differences, anything to guide me. There were small cracks in the asphalt that repeated in the same pattern. A low branch at the edge of the forest appeared twice in identical position. The sense of repetition grew oppressive. I tried to focus on breathing, on the feel of the steering wheel, on the sound of the engine. Around what I assumed was midnight, I saw lights ahead. A small diner sat at the edge of a clearing, warm yellow spilling from the windows. I slowed, hoping to find someone, anything familiar. The parking lot was full of cars, doors open, engines running. Inside, televisions played quietly, coffee machines hissed, but no one moved. No one sat at tables, no cashier behind the counter. I circled the lot, engine idling, heart racing. Everything was perfect, clean, normal, and entirely abandoned. A sign leaned at the edge of the clearing, written in large, uneven letters on cardboard. It said simply, "You missed it." I blinked at it, my eyes searching for context, any explanation, but there was none. The words did not make sense. I had not missed anything. I was just driving. My pulse quickened. I tried to leave, steering back toward the road I had come from. The GPS insisted I follow the same path, the same narrow curves. The diner, the cars, the sign all disappeared behind me. After a few minutes, I realized I was back at the same stretch of road. The same trees, the same cracks, the same faint shoulder. The road curved exactly as it had before. No exit appeared, no alternative route. I drove all night. I stopped only once to eat, feeling exhausted, but each time I returned to the road, the pattern repeated. The trees, the asphalt, the faint shoulder. Occasionally, I saw a car parked at the edge, lights on, doors open, only for it to vanish moments later. The GPS continued to loop, recalculating endlessly. Sunrise came slowly, pale and gray. The sky lightened, and the pattern finally broke. I found a curve leading to a wider road, a road I recognized. The trees opened to fields, distant towns, and traffic moving normally. My hands shook as I accelerated, merging onto the highway. The GPS immediately responded, showing the correct path home. The diner, the parked cars, the sign, the looping road, none of it appeared again on any map, none of it visible once I returned to normal roads. I told myself it had been fatigue, a hallucination caused by hours of driving, but the memory felt too precise, too detailed. The smells, the textures, the repetition of the asphalt, the narrow shoulder, the stillness of the forest, it all stayed with me. By the time I reached my town, everything was normal. People carried groceries, the sun was fully up, cars honked, and moved along the main street. I parked at home, shut off the engine, and sat for a long time. The road I had driven in darkness was gone from my mind, a stretch of highway that existed only for those hours, perfectly ordinary, yet entirely wrong. I learned that night that some roads, no matter how familiar, can twist in ways that make time and distance unreliable, and that exhaustion can create places that feel real, look real, and follow every rule of reality until you finally escape. I was driving late one summer evening, heading back from a long weekend trip with no real plan. The highway stretched ahead in straight, dim-lit lines, bordered by dark fields that pressed close to the asphalt. My friend had fallen asleep in the passenger seat hours before, leaning against the window, and I had been watching the road alone. The radio had gone out somewhere past the last town, leaving only the engine and the tires on cracked pavement. I could feel the fatigue pressing in, heavy behind my eyes, making the edges of the road blur slightly. Somewhere in the middle of the drive, the highway curved into an unfamiliar stretch of road. It was not on the GPS, at least not in the way I remembered. The lines were faded, the shoulders overgrown, and the trees on either side pressed close, leaning in as if watching. I slowed, trying to confirm the route, but the screen flickered and recalculated without offering a clear answer. The air in the car smelled faintly of pine and dust, a dry, earthy scent that made the stillness heavier. The first oddity came quietly. A single car appeared parked along the roadside. Its doors were open, engine off, lights dimmed but still visible. I passed slowly, expecting to see someone emerge, a driver, maybe a stranded traveler, but there was no one. The car looked untouched, clean, normal. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see movement, but the vehicle had vanished. I shook my head, telling myself I had imagined it, and pressed on. The road began to narrow as I drove. The cracks in the asphalt deepened, the edges grew rough, and the shoulders disappeared into a tangle of undergrowth. I felt the tires scrape slightly on the edges of the pavement. The GPS still showed the highway as a line ahead, but the map appeared to fold and stretch strangely, as if it did not quite match the road beneath me. The forest on either side thickened, branches brushing against the windshield when the wind picked up, leaving streaks of moisture from condensation. I realized after some time that I had passed the same marker twice. A narrow stretch of gravel on the left, a fallen branch over the edge, a set of road markings in the asphalt. They repeated exactly. I slowed further, watching every detail, counting them, but the sequence repeated a third time. The road circled back on itself, without turning into a recognizable loop. I cannot explain it. It was impossible, yet there it was, a repetition too precise to ignore. My mind tried to rationalize it. I thought of fatigue, sleep deprivation, dehydration, or the faint hum of monotony on long stretches of road. I tried to focus on breathing, on the feel of the wheel, on the sound of the tires on asphalt, anything to ground myself. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and darkness settled quickly, the clouds above heavy and low. My headlights picked out only a small arc ahead, throwing the trees into deep shadows, cutting the forest into strips of gray and black. Another car appeared, parked at the edge of the road. Its lights were on, doors open like the first. I slowed instinctively, checking the interior. No one inside, no movement. I watched it as I passed, eyes flicking to the mirrors. When I looked again, it was gone. There was nothing to explain it. I pressed on, gripping the steering wheel tighter, feeling a tension in my chest that had nothing to do with the drive and everything to do with the impossibility of the road. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. The night stretched endlessly, the repetition of the asphalt, the narrowing road, the forest pressing in on both sides. The GPS recalculated constantly, redrawing lines that made no sense. At some point, I pulled over onto the shoulder, needing to stretch, needing to breathe. The air outside was colder than expected, damp and still, carrying a faint smell of wet earth. The forest around me was unnervingly quiet. No wind, no insects, no distant cars. Even the usual night birds had gone silent. I returned to the car and continued driving. I began marking details in my mind. A branch at the side, a knot in a tree, a crack in the pavement. Each repeat added to the weight pressing down, the impossibility of breaking free. At one point, I thought I saw another vehicle moving ahead, a car weaving slightly in my lane, but when I approached, there was nothing. It was gone. The road stretched as if untouched, the forest unchanged. Near what I assumed was midnight, I noticed lights ahead. A small diner, neon dimmed but still readable, sat at the edge of a clearing. I slowed, hoping to find someone, anything familiar, but the parking lot was filled with cars, doors open, engines idling softly. The televisions inside played quietly, coffee machines hissed, but the building was empty of movement. The chairs were pushed back, cups left mid-use, tables set, and yet no one was there. The smell of brewed coffee and fried food hung in the air, without the heat of kitchens or people moving. At the edge of the lot was a sign, handwritten on cardboard, leaning against a lamppost. You missed it. The letters were uneven, jagged, but the message felt deliberate. I blinked at it, stomach tightening. I could not tell what I had missed or why it mattered. I checked the diner, the cars, the road beyond. Everything seemed normal and entirely wrong at once. I tried to leave. I turned the wheel toward the direction I had come, hoping to reconnect with familiar highway, but the GPS redrew the same path ahead. The road curved back into view, the diner, the cars, a sign, the same stretch of asphalt repeating in exact detail. I tried every turn, every deviation. Nothing broke the pattern. The night pressed closer, heavier, colder. I drove in silence, headlights cutting narrow arcs of light into the trees, until the gray of dawn finally arrived. When sunlight touched the forest, the repetition finally ended. I found a stretch of road opening onto fields, distant towns, and traffic moving normally. The diner was gone, the parked cars were gone, the sign had fallen and was unreadable. The asphalt widened, shoulders appeared, the GPS recalculated instantly. I merged onto the familiar highway, relief flooding me. The forest returned to its natural scale, the repetition vanished, and the morning felt entirely ordinary. The stretch of road I had passed through never appeared on any map again. I drove through the region later in daylight and could not find the curves or narrow stretches, the repeated cracks, the strange diner. My memory remained vivid. The smell of damp earth, the thick forest pressing in, the stillness, the repeated asphalt, the sense of being trapped. It taught me to notice details, to respect the weight of long stretches of road. and to trust when a path feels wrong, even if nothing visible explains it. The highway eventually led home. I reached my town, parked, and sat for a long time, heart still racing. The road had been ordinary, empty, and entirely believable, yet for hours it had felt impossible to escape. I never took that route again. It was late December, a few nights before Christmas, when we decided to drive straight through rather than stay in a motel. We had been on the road for hours, passing stretches of highway where the lights of small towns appeared and disappeared like dim stars. The night air was cold through the cracked windows, carrying a faint smell of snow and exhaust. I was driving, my friend asleep in the passenger seat, head leaning against the window. Fatigue had set in hours ago, the kind that tugs at your eyelids and makes the edges of the road blur. Somewhere in the middle of nowhere, we took an exit neither of us remembered seeing. There was no sign, or if there was one, we had missed it. The ramp curved down into darkness bordered by pine trees that looked taller than the moonlight suggested. The road felt narrower than it should, and the paint on the asphalt was faded. It was the kind of exit that gives a feeling, just a flicker of hesitation, the sort that makes you glance at the rearview mirror and double-check you're out. The town appeared gradually, a cluster of dim lights beyond a curve. At first, it looked normal. There was a diner with neon letters half-lit, a small motel with a flickering sign, a gas station with pumps standing silent. We slowed, expecting someone to be around. Maybe a clerk, a driver, a late-night customer. But the more we looked, the more off it felt. No one moved. The doors of cars sat open, as though people had left in a hurry. Inside the diner, the TV blared in a muted channel, something on the local news or a Christmas special, and the coffee machine still hissed. Chairs were pushed back from tables, coffee cups left in mid-use. Every building looked occupied and normal, but completely empty of people. We circled the main street slowly, trying to make sense of it. The snow had started lightly, dusting the parked cars and empty sidewalks. No footprints marred the fresh layer. The motel's lobby lights glowed warmly, the lobby chair arranged just so, magazines on the table, but no clerk behind the counter. The air smelled faintly of food from the diner, of coffee and bread, but the smell didn't come with movement or heat, just a frozen, waiting smell. At the edge of town, nailed to a lamppost that leaned slightly, was a sign in uneven handwriting on cardboard. You missed it. The words weren't threatening, exactly, but the message sank deep in my chest. It didn't make sense. What had we missed? We hadn't been gone long. The town didn't appear on any map we had, and the highway numbers we passed didn't match anything we remembered seeing. I felt the car slow as I looked at the sign, the headlights illuminating the words in the wet snow. My friend stirred, eyes half open, noticing it too, but neither of us said anything. We both felt it, that shift in weight, the unnerving stillness that made the world feel smaller and heavier. We tried to leave. I turned the wheel back toward the ramp, thinking maybe we had simply entered from a different exit. The GPS seemed to lag, but then redrew itself, showing the route back to the highway. I followed it, expecting the town to shrink behind us, but the road curved and bent again, and suddenly we were back on the same main street. The diner, the motel, the gas station. Everything in place, cars with open doors, lights on inside buildings, the TV humming. I slowed, checked the windows, the sidewalks. Nothing had changed. We tried again, left at the next turn, hoping to find a street leading away. The same street curved into view, the same buildings lit against the night, same chairs, same cups, same absence of life. It was subtle at first, the sense that we were driving in circles, but after the third loop, my chest tightened. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, but the dark night seemed to stretch endlessly. I glanced at the clock. It had frozen at 2:17. The GPS refused to reroute. It flickered, recalculating endlessly, as if the device itself had given up. We stayed low in the truck, neither speaking, listening to the engine hum and the occasional pop of tires on frozen patches of snow. The town didn't change. Streetlights flickered once or twice, but that was it. Every building, every vehicle, Every patch of snow looked identical to the last pass. We stopped counting loops after the fourth. Numbers didn't feel real anymore. The air inside the truck smelled warmer, tighter, as if the cold outside was being denied. I checked the rearview mirror constantly, expecting movement behind us, but saw only the same empty road disappearing into pines. Morning came without warning. The sky lightened slowly, pale gray at first. Then the sun touched the trees with weak winter light. When the colors changed, the repetition snapped. I realized we were looking at the town one last time, and this time, the snow had melted slightly on the roads. Tire tracks from the truck the night before crisscrossed the street. The diner's door was closed. The gas station pumps idle, the motel sign steady. We could see a car pull into the distance, a pickup truck leaving the town along a road we hadn't noticed in the dark. People existed here now, moving naturally. Not panicked, not strange, just normal. We drove through the town one final time. Nothing was abandoned. The sign at the edge had fallen over, wet and unreadable. The buildings were still lit, but there was no lingering sense of stasis. I could feel my own heartbeat slow, the grip of tension in my chest loosening. We found the highway and merged onto it without hesitation. The familiar lines of asphalt and reflective markers reassuring. The GPS responded instantly, recalculating and leading us home. The strange loop, the empty buildings, the sign, all of it faded into a memory that felt half like a dream, half like a warning. I never found the exit again on any map, never passed it in daylight. By the time we reached our town, it was late afternoon. The Christmas lights flickered in houses along the main road. People carried packages, cars honked, dogs barked. The ordinary world had returned. We didn't speak much on the drive from that point, only acknowledging each other with small looks. The loop town, the empty diners, the sign, the repeated streets, whatever had trapped us had no evidence left. It felt like a moment caught outside of normal time, a glitch in reality we had driven through and finally escaped. I don't know why we entered that town. I don't know why we left in loops until sunrise. I only know that sometimes roads curve in ways you don't remember, towns appear when they shouldn't, and the world can feel completely normal and completely wrong at the same time. That day, I learned to notice exits I hadn't seen before, to watch for streets that shouldn't exist, and to respect the strange stillness of roads at night. We made it home for Christmas. I never took that back road again. In September of 2020, I was working a seasonal job delivering rental camping gear to remote drop points in the Oregon backcountry. The company catered to people who wanted isolation without hauling equipment themselves. We drove the gear out, staged it at GPS coordinates, and left before the renters arrived. It paid better than most seasonal work and kept me moving, which mattered that year. I went with 2 co-workers I barely knew outside the job. We shared shifts, not history. None of us used names on deliveries. It kept things simple. That morning we loaded the truck before sunrise. The weather report showed clear skies, but the air already carried damp cold, the kind that settles into your hands. We checked the inventory twice because the drop was far. Tents, food bins, fuel canisters, cookware, folding cots. Everything had a tag and a checklist. The coordinates were deep, 6 hours down logging roads that barely counted as roads anymore. The drive started smooth and then broke down into gravel. Then worse. The pavement ended and the forest closed in. Fir and pine crowded both sides, trunks straight and tall, blocking distance. The road twisted without pattern. Some stretches looked freshly graded, others washed out and scarred. No service, no radio reception. We drove with the windows cracked because the truck smelled like fuel and canvas. Hours passed without seeing another vehicle. Not even tire tracks that looked recent. We crossed shallow creeks and climbed slow grades where the engine strained. The farther we went, the quieter it felt. Not silent, but thin. The kind of quiet where sound does not travel far. By early afternoon, the GPS led us onto a narrow spur that looked unused. Grass grew through the center. Branches scraped the sides of the truck. We slowed to avoid puncturing a tire. When we reached the coordinates, the road ended in a small clearing shaped by old logging work. Stumps sat low and gray. Moss covered everything else. The campsite was already there. At first glance, it looked like a normal setup. A fire pit sat in the middle, stones arranged in a tight ring. Ash lay thick inside, darker toward the center. When I stepped closer, I saw a faint heat shimmer rising. The ashes were warm, not hot, but recent. The smell of burned wood still hung in the air. There was no tent. The ground around the pit was packed down. Food scraps lay near a log, half buried in dirt. A torn wrapper, a crushed can, the corner of a cardboard box. Fresh enough that ants had not found it yet. A folding camp chair sat collapsed near the trees, one leg bent wrong. We checked the GPS again. The coordinates matched. This was the drop point. No one should have been there. The renters were scheduled for the next day. The permit confirmed it. We were early. The forest around us showed no movement, no voices, no wind strong enough to shift branches. Just a steady stillness that made small sounds stand out. I walked the edge of the clearing and noticed marks in the dirt. Drag marks, long, uneven lines leading from the fire pit toward the trees. They cut through pine needles and moss, exposing damp soil beneath. The marks were wide enough to suggest weight, not just a log pulled for firewood. They disappeared into thick brush where the forest swallowed them. I felt a pressure in my chest I could not explain. Not panic, more like the sense that we had stepped into something unfinished. We started unloading because that was the job. We placed the gear where it always went, stacking bins, setting the tent bag near a flat patch of ground. My movements felt slow. I kept scanning the tree line without realizing it. The wood stood dense and dark even in daylight. The canopy blocked sun in uneven patches, leaving the ground in shadow. As we worked, the forest sound shifted. Birds stopped first. The small constant noise that usually fills space dropped away. Even insects went quiet. The silence came all at once, sharp and complete. I noticed it because my own breathing sounded too loud. Then we heard it. A voice came from deeper in the trees, off to the right of the drag marks. It sounded like one of us. Same tone, same pacing. Not shouted, not rushed. It carried just far enough to be heard clearly, as if the speaker stood at the edge of the clearing but out of sight. No one moved. I felt my skin tighten along my arms. The sound repeated, closer this time, then faded. It did not echo. It did not break the way sound usually does through trees. It felt placed. I looked at the others. Both were facing the same direction I was. No one spoke. No one stepped forward. Another call came, this one longer, pulling sound out over distance. The pitch matched one of the co-workers. Too close to be coincidence. My brain searched for animals that could do that. Birds sometimes mimic, so do some mammals. But nothing I knew could copy a human voice with that accuracy, with that timing. The silence afterward pressed harder. The forest felt hollow, like something had been turned off. We did not finish unloading. We loaded everything back into the truck without coordination, hands moving fast and clumsy. Gear banged against metal. The sound felt wrong in the quiet. I kept my back to the truck, eyes on the trees, waiting for movement that never came. As we pulled away, the drag marks stayed in view longer than I wanted. They cut a line into the forest that felt deliberate. We drove without speaking until the clearing vanished behind us. The return trip took longer. The road seemed to stretch. Every bend looked the same. When we reached a junction, the GPS lagged, then corrected itself. My hand shook on the steering wheel. Back at the depot, we filed an incident report. It stayed clinical. Warm ashes, unoccupied site, unidentified voice, no injuries. We tagged the coordinates as unsafe and flagged them for investigation. Weeks later, the explanation came back. The area had been used by illegal campers and scavengers who moved through the forest following logging roads. People living rough, avoiding patrols. Some used the rental sites because they were maintained and predictable. Fires left warm, trash half buried, gear damaged and abandoned when it could not be carried. The drag marks matched someone hauling a heavy load, likely a pack or a body-sized bundle of belongings, into cover when they heard our truck approach. The silence came because wildlife avoids human activity. The voice had been human, someone trying to distract us or gauged distance without being seen. Mimicry came from close observation. Seasonal workers talk a lot. Our voices carried while unloading. Someone listening could repeat the sound well enough to confuse us. No animals were involved. No unknown forces. Just people hiding in the woods, using fear to protect space. The site was cleared later by Forest Service crews. They found makeshift shelters deeper in torn tarps, burned cans, footprints leading away from the clearing. No one was located. I finished the season and did not return the next year. I still think about that clearing when I drive logging roads. About how thin the line is between maintained and abandoned. About how silence can arrive like a switch flipped. The forest did not do anything that day. People did. That knowledge sits heavier than any other explanation. I had been driving without a plan for days, moving because stopping felt worse. I slept in the car wherever I could, folded into the seat with a jacket over my face, waking when trucks passed or my legs went numb. The burnout sat deep in my chest. I kept the windows cracked even in cold air, needing movement, needing the road, noise to keep my thoughts from circling. That night the highway was empty in the way only long stretches between towns get. No billboards, no houses, just reflectors flashing white and then gone. I watched my fuel gauge more than the road. When I saw the sign for a rest stop, I took it without thinking. I needed a bathroom, a place with light, a place that looked like people still existed. The rest stop looked normal from the ramp. Tall lights were on, evenly spaced. The parking lot had fresh lines, no weeds pushing through. Trash cans stood upright and clean, liners pulled tight. The building had a low concrete front and wide windows that reflected the lights back at me. Everything suggested maintenance. Everything suggested routine. There were no cars. I parked near the entrance and sat for a moment, engine running, listening. No footsteps, no voices, no hum from vending machines. The place felt paused, like it was waiting for something to happen. I shut off the engine and the silence thickened. Inside, the air smelled like cleaner and cold tile. The floor was dry. No paper littered the corners. The sinks were wiped down. The bathrooms were unlocked, lights bright. That was when I noticed the mirrors were gone. Not covered, not broken, removed. Clean outlines remained where metal frames had once been bolted. The walls held pale rectangles, dust-free, edges sharp. I washed my hands and stared at the empty space where my face should have been. Without a reflection, the room felt wrong, like depth had been taken away. I checked the other side. Same thing. No mirrors anywhere. Not above sinks, not near the door. Even the metal plate, where a baby changing station would usually be mounted, was bare. I walked back out and circled the building. The windows were clear but showed nothing inside except tables and a blank wall where a large directory map should have been. Outside, the wind pushed against the building in short bursts. The lights did not flicker. The place felt maintained but unused, like a set built for a purpose that had passed. I returned to the car and pulled away. The exit should have curved back onto the highway. Instead, the road narrowed and bent into trees. The asphalt changed texture, rougher, the center line gone. I slowed, convinced I had taken a service road by mistake. I looked for signs. There were none. I tried to turn around. The shoulder dropped off into a shallow ditch. I drove forward, expecting the road to loop back. It kept narrowing. The trees pressed closer, branches reaching over the pavement. The darkness thickened between the trunks. My headlights felt weak. I told myself this was construction, a temporary reroute, something I had missed because I was tired. I kept going until the road widened again and merged with another stretch of highway. I recognized the mile markers. Relief came sharp and sudden, leaving me shaky. I drove until exhaustion forced me to pull over again, this time on a shoulder near a wide gravel turnout. I slept poorly, waking to the sound of my own breathing and the tick of cooling metal. In daylight, nothing felt wrong. I drove back past where the rest stop should have been. The sign was there, weathered but intact. The ramp led to a closed gate and orange barrels. A notice explained the stop had been shut down for renovation after vandalism. Mirrors removed to prevent theft. Facilities kept open during daytime hours only. At night, access blocked. I stood there longer than I needed to, staring at the gate. I had driven through it without seeing it. I had parked in a place that should have been closed. I told myself gates get left open. Barrels get moved. Fatigue bends perception. Weeks later, back home, I reviewed my dash cam footage to clear space on the memory card. I skipped through long stretches of empty road, headlights cutting through dark. When the rest stop appeared, the timestamp showed after midnight. The camera angle caught the building, the lights, my car pulling in. I fast-forwarded until I reached the moment I left. As the car rolled forward, the audio picked up a sound. Low, close, a whisper, just a breath shaping a word. My name. I paused the video. I listened again. The sound was there, layered under the engine noise, clear enough to recognize. I had not said my name out loud on that trip. I had avoided calls. I had spoken to no one. The dash cam did not record radio unless the volume was high, and I had driven in silence. I checked the metadata. The audio channel had interference marks. The dash cam model used an open frequency to capture cabin sound. It could pick up nearby transmissions if strong enough. Truckers used CB radios. Some rest stops had maintenance crews with handheld units. Someone could have been nearby, close enough for their voice to bleed through. I searched the footage earlier in the night. There was faint but present, hours before the rest stop. The same whisper, repeated once, then lost to static. I had missed it the first time. I scrolled back further. I found another instance near a fuel station. The timing matched when I had stood outside the car, checking my phone. The explanation settled slowly. My phone background had my name displayed in large text. I used it as a reminder. Anyone passing could have seen it. Anyone bored, anyone drunk, anyone with a radio could have spoken it. The dash cam could have caught it. My tired mind could have stitched meaning where none existed. I listened again, forcing myself to hear it as noise, as overlap, as chance. The words sounded flat, without intent. Not a call, not a threat, just sound. I deleted the footage and reformatted the card. I drove past that stretch months later in full daylight. The rest stop remained closed, barrels bright, gate locked. The trees stood back from the road. The asphalt was wide and marked. Nothing narrowed, nothing bent. The burnout eased over time. Sleep returned to normal hours. The road lost its pull. What stayed with me was the way exhaustion can make ordinary places feel staged. How maintenance without people feels unsettling. How a missing mirror can make a room feel empty in the wrong way. I learned to stop driving when my eyes burned and my thoughts slowed. I learned that being alone long enough can turn coincidence into story, and story into fear, if you let it. We were driving late, well past midnight, with no real plan beyond killing time. The car was old, reliable, and loud enough that we could hear the road through the floor. We had a box of old radios in the back, the kind pulled from junkyards and flea markets, each one repaired just enough to power on. We thought it would be funny to scan through static while driving empty roads, just to see what still existed out there. There was no purpose beyond curiosity and boredom. The night was clear but moonless. The forest pressed close to the road, tall trees leaning inward so the sky narrowed into a dark strip overhead. The pavement was cracked and uneven, then slowly gave way to gravel without warning. The tires sounded different once we left the main road, a steady crunch that made the car feel slower, even though the speed stayed the same. No other vehicles passed us. No houses, no lights, just trees and darkness. We powered on one of the radios and started turning the dial. Most of what came through was empty noise, low hissing broken by brief bursts of distant music or clipped voices that vanished before we could make sense of them. The antenna was bent, held in place with tape, but it worked well enough. Then, between two bands of static, a voice came through clean and calm. It was a man's voice, middle-aged, even tone, no emotion. He wasn't talking to anyone directly. He was reading numbers in steady intervals, then pausing, then giving what sounded like simple directions. Distances, turns, landmarks. No station name, no call sign, just the voice. At first, we laughed and assumed it was some strange broadcast bouncing off the terrain. But then the directions lined up with the road ahead. A left curve came right when he said it would. A narrow bridge appeared exactly where the voice mentioned a crossing. The timing was precise enough to be uncomfortable. The radio volume stayed low, but the clarity of the signal didn't fade as we moved deeper into the forest. The road narrowed again. Gravel thickened. Branches scraped lightly along the sides of the car. The headlights caught dust hanging in the air like fog. The voice continued, steady and patient, never rushing. The numbers sounded measured, like coordinates or mile counts. The directions came seconds before each change in the road, never late, never early. We tried switching the radio off. The signal vanished, replaced by silence. When we turned it back on, the voice returned immediately, continuing as if nothing had happened. We tried a different radio. Same result. The same voice, same tone, same pacing. No matter which unit we used. The signal came through on the same range of the dial. At some point, one of us suggested turning around. The forest felt wrong, too quiet, and the road was clearly not maintained. When the car slowed and the steering wheel turned, the radio cut to static instantly. Not gradual interference, but a sharp break, like a switch being thrown. The static stayed as long as the car faced away from the road ahead. When we straightened out again, the voice returned. That was the moment the mood changed completely. The idea that it could be coincidence stopped making sense. We weren't lost yet, but we were no longer comfortable. The radio wasn't just predicting the road. It was reacting to us. The forest grew denser. The gravel road split once without signage, and the voice directed us down the narrower branch. The trees closed in further, their trunks close enough that the headlights barely fit between them. The air smelled damp and cold, even though it was summer. The car's engine echoed strangely, the sound swallowed by the woods instead of bouncing back. We passed old markers half buried in dirt, rusted posts with faded numbers that didn't match anything on modern maps. The voice acknowledged each one before we reached it, calmly noting them like a checklist. We stopped checking our phones after losing signal entirely. The screen showed nothing but blank grids and error messages. Eventually, the voice stopped. No warning, no static, just silence. The radio stayed on, but nothing came through. The road ahead ended abruptly in a clearing. We rolled forward slowly and stopped without speaking. In front of us sat a small ranger station, or what looked like one. A single-story building made of weathered wood and concrete. The windows were boarded, but the boards looked new. The paint on the walls was peeling, but the door hinges were clean and recently oiled. There was a sign near the entrance, faded almost white from sun exposure. The lettering was barely readable, but it marked the building as a ranger outpost. No park name, no dates, no agency logo, just the words and an arrow pointing inward. The headlights revealed tire tracks in the dirt. Fresh ones, deep, sharp impressions leading from the road straight up to the building. They hadn't been there long. The edges hadn't crumbled yet. They didn't belong to us. We stayed in the car and shut off the engine. The silence felt heavy, pressing in from all sides. The forest around the clearing was still. No wind, no insects. The radio remained quiet. We tried scanning again, but nothing came through on any band. The voice was gone. We didn't get out. We didn't approach the building. We reversed slowly, careful not to disturb the tracks, and turned the car around in the clearing. The headlights swept across the ranger station one last time, and that was when we noticed something else. The boards on the windows were secured from the inside. The nails pointed outward, clean and evenly spaced. Whoever boarded it up had been inside when they did it. The drive back felt longer, even though the road stayed the same. The gravel eventually gave way to pavement again. The forest thinned. Cell signal returned without warning. None of the radios picked up anything unusual after that. Just normal stations, distant and faint. When we got home, curiosity pushed us to check maps and records. The forest road didn't exist on any official map. Not current ones, not archived ones. The ranger station didn't appear in any registry. No decommissioning record. No mention of an outpost in that area at any point. The land was marked as protected, with no public access roads listed. The most unsettling part came later when we cleaned the car. The tires were packed with the same gravel and dirt from the clearing, but mixed into it were small bits of fresh wood splinters and flakes of dried paint. White paint, the same shade we'd seen peeling from the ranger station walls. Whatever the broadcast was, it wasn't random. It guided us to a place that still saw use, despite being officially erased. The voice didn't threaten us. It didn't warn us. It simply directed us until we arrived, then stopped once its job was done. We never tested the radios on night drives again. We kept them, but the curiosity faded fast. Some signals aren't meant to be found, and some roads stay off maps for reasons that only make sense once you reach the end of them. My name's Daniel, and in August of 2021, I took a cash job that I should have refused the moment I saw the paperwork. I was between contracts, short on money, and checking local listings for odd delivery work. The post was brief. Vehicle transport. One way. Paid in cash on completion. Night delivery only. No meeting required. The contact dropped off an envelope at a rented mailbox in Phoenix. Inside were printed instructions, a location pin with no address, and a key taped to a single sheet of paper. No last name, no phone number, no email. The car was parked in a public garage downtown. It was a mid-sized sedan, clean inside and out, washed recently, with no personal items. The interior smelled old, like long-settled dust, mixed with metal and dry upholstery. Not dirty, just unused. The glove box was empty. The trunk held nothing except a basic roadside kit. The fuel tank was nearly full. The registration was current, but the owner name matched the same first name printed on the instructions and nothing else. I took photos, counted the cash advance, and left the garage close to midnight. The destination wasn't disclosed. The instructions said to start driving and follow the GPS pin when it activated. I assumed it would load once I reached a certain point. The city fell away fast, lights thinning into wide gaps of darkness. August heat still clung to the air even after midnight. The car's air conditioning worked but struggled, blowing dry air that smelled faintly like the interior, never fully cold. I drove north at first, then east, then south again. The route made no sense, but I trusted the navigation. Around 2:40 a.m., I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror that didn't belong to anyone passing through. The vehicle stayed back far enough that I couldn't make out its shape, but close enough to remain steady in the mirror. The headlights were off. I only saw it when the moonlight caught the outline and when it crossed reflective markers on the road. I slowed slightly. It slowed. I changed lanes. It followed without drifting. When I sped up, it matched me without closing the distance. I exited the highway and pulled onto a wide shoulder near a dry wash. I stopped completely, engine running, hazard lights off. The road was empty ahead. The other vehicle rolled to a stop far back, just within sight, still dark. No doors opened. No interior light came on. It stayed there. I waited several minutes. My phone had signal, but no new instructions. The GPS screen showed the same blank route line extending into open desert. When I pulled back onto the road, the other vehicle followed again, keeping the same distance. The road narrowed as the miles passed. Pavement turned rough, then smoother again, then rougher. Reflective signs vanished. The GPS rerouted me without warning, turning me onto a road that didn't appear on the satellite view. The screen showed a pale gray line cutting across nothing. No labels, no nearby landmarks. The road itself looked recently graded, flat and wide but unmarked. No center line, no shoulder, just compacted dirt that felt solid under the tires. The other vehicle followed me onto it without hesitation. The desert at night feels larger than during the day. The sky presses down, heavy and empty. The headlights reached only so far before fading into dark shapes that could have been rocks or scrub or nothing at all. The car behind stayed steady, still without lights. I couldn't hear it, only sense it through the mirror and the way the air felt inside the cabin. After nearly 40 minutes, the GPS announced a final approach without naming anything. The road curved once, then straightened. Ahead stood a tall metal gate spanning the width of the road, chain link reinforced with steel bars, locked with a thick chain and padlock. No signs, no mailbox, no building, no driveway beyond it. Just desert on both sides and a narrow strip of dirt continuing past the fence into darkness. I pulled up close to the gate and shut off the engine. The other vehicle stopped far back again, exactly like before. I sat there, hands on the wheel, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. The instructions said to leave the car, lock it, place the keys in the envelope provided, and leave the envelope in the drop box. I hadn't seen a box. Then I noticed a small metal slot welded into one of the gate posts. Beneath it was a shallow tray bolted to the ground. On the tray sat a folded receipt, already signed. My name printed in block letters where the delivery confirmation should be. The amount matched what I'd been promised. I checked the time. It was just past 4 a.m. The other vehicle remained still. I stepped out of the car. The heat hit me immediately, trapped against the ground even before sunrise. The desert was silent. No insects, no wind. I walked to the gate, my footsteps loud on the packed dirt. The receipt was warm to the touch, like it had been placed there recently. I compared the signature to the one on the registration. Same hand, same slant. I returned to the car, shut it off fully, and removed the key. I locked the doors, placed the key in the envelope, and slid it into the slot. It dropped onto metal with a flat sound. I stepped back. The job was done. I walked toward my own car, parked a short distance behind the delivery vehicle. As I did, the other vehicle's engine started. It didn't approach. It turned around slowly, tires crunching softly, and drove back the way we had come, headlights still off. I waited until it disappeared before getting into my car. I didn't follow the GPS on the way back. I drove until I found a paved road with signs and followed it until the sun came up. Once I reached the town, I checked my phone more carefully. The route I'd taken after leaving the highway didn't exist on any map. No record, no satellite image, just empty space where the road should have been. A week later, I deposited the cash. It was real, no issues. I tried to look up the vehicle registration again out of curiosity. The record came back inactive, marked as transferred months earlier. I never heard from the contact again. No follow-up, no complaints, nothing. What stays with me isn't the paperwork or the gate. It's the pacing vehicle. It stayed with me the entire way, never forcing me to stop, never trying to pass, never showing itself fully. It waited when I waited. It moved when I moved. It followed the same unmarked road without hesitation, as if it already knew the way. I don't take night delivery jobs anymore. I don't accept printed instructions from strangers. And I don't follow routes that don't exist when daylight comes. Whatever that job was, it wasn't about moving a car. It was about making sure I did exactly what I was told without asking questions and without seeing who was watching the entire time. It was March of 2019 when we decided to drive from Los Angeles to Zion National Park. The plan was simple, a 3-day trip to clear our heads before work picked up again. I had just finished a long week of overtime, and both of my friends wanted a break from the city. We packed early in the morning, the car filled with snacks, sleeping bags, a tent we probably wouldn't use, and enough water for a few days. The desert drive was supposed to be long, but easy. None of us expected anything strange to happen. By the time we reached the edge of southern Nevada, the sun was dropping low, and the air outside had that dry, weightless stillness that always feels heavier than silence. The map showed a smaller road cutting across the desert, a route that looked shorter than the highway curve that looped north. It was my friend's idea to take it. He said it might save us an hour or more. The road looked fine at first, straight, cracked in a few places, but nothing out of the ordinary. No other cars, just sand, scattered scrub brush, and a shimmer of heat rising from the asphalt even as the light started to fade. After maybe 30 minutes, the road narrowed. The paint markings disappeared. The asphalt looked old, almost as if it had been laid decades ago and never maintained. Small rocks crunched under the tires, and the wind had started to pick up, carrying dust across the horizon. Then we saw the trailer. It sat off the road by maybe 50 yards, the metal sides rusted to a deep orange color. The windows were blackened from what looked like fire damage. The glass melted into uneven shapes. Along the fence next to it hung dozens of shoes, some tied by their laces, others hooked through the wire. Men's boots, women's heels, sneakers, even children's shoes, all sun-bleached and stiff from the heat. It didn't make sense. There wasn't another house or building anywhere around. No cars, no power lines, no sound. Just that trailer and the shoes moving slightly in the wind. The air around it fell off. I didn't say anything, and neither did the others. The car stayed quiet as we passed, the hum of the tires against the broken road the only sound. The farther we drove, the worse the road got. The asphalt split into long cracks that widened until one of us had to slow to a crawl to avoid a dip deep enough to scrape the bottom of the car. The sun disappeared completely soon after, leaving a faded blue sky that turned darker by the minute. We hadn't seen another vehicle in hours. At some point, we decided to pull over and check the GPS. The service dropped. The screen froze. Every direction showed the same featureless beige background with no road lines. The map still marked Zion to the northeast, but it didn't show any connecting routes from where we were. The air outside the car was colder than I expected for a desert night, sharp against my face. I could hear the wind sweeping across the sand in low waves. We decided to keep driving, thinking we'd eventually find a junction or another sign. About an hour later, one of my friends noticed something strange. The rear of the car felt uneven, like the weight had shifted. We stopped again and stepped out to check. The headlights cut across the sand and small pieces of broken asphalt. When we circled around to the back, the spare tire mount on the hatch was empty. The cover was gone. The bolts were loose, hanging halfway out as if someone had removed the tire carefully. It didn't make sense. None of us remembered stopping since we left the main highway, and the spare had been there when we loaded the car that morning. There were no tire marks nearby, no footprints, nothing that showed anyone had come close. The sand was undisturbed except for our own tracks. That moment changed the mood completely. None of us said anything, but the silence inside the car after we got back and felt heavier than before. The road grew rougher, the headlights showing nothing but empty space ahead. We passed a few dry creek beds and old fence posts leaning sideways, half buried in sand. It must have been close to midnight when we decided to stop for the night. The fuel gauge was dropping, and we didn't want to risk running out in the dark. There was a flat stretch just off the road, wide enough to park. The sand was firm, and the wind had died down. We planned to sleep in the car. The desert was completely black except for the faint stars above. The temperature had dropped fast, and the air inside the car turned cold. I tried to rest, but it was hard to stay still. The silence wasn't peaceful. It felt thick, like something pressed against the windows. I stared at the windshield for a while, watching the outlines of the horizon. I must have dozed off for a short time, because when I opened my eyes again, it was darker. That was when I heard it. A sound that didn't fit with the emptiness outside. It started faint, just a single step on the gravel behind the car. Then another. Slow, steady. Not rushed or animal-like. Each one was heavy, pressing down with weight. The car shifted slightly from the vibrations. It moved around to the side, pacing close enough that I could hear the sand crunch under its steps. There was no growling, no talking, no sound other than slow breathing and those deliberate footsteps. I held still, listening to it circle. It stopped near the driver's side window for several seconds. The breathing grew louder, close enough that I could almost feel it through the glass. Then it moved again, walking around the front of the car, pausing every few feet. I couldn't tell if it was watching or just listening. The air inside the car was ice cold. I didn't look up, didn't move, just waited. Eventually, the sound faded toward the rear of the car and stopped altogether. The desert went quiet again. I stayed awake the rest of the night, staring at the dashboard clock. Every sound after that felt amplified. The creak of the cooling metal, the wind brushing against the mirrors. Nothing else moved. When the first light came up over the horizon, I got out. The others had barely slept. The sand around the car was covered in footprints. They weren't right. The shape was human, but the spacing and angles were wrong. Some of the steps were wider apart than normal stride. and others overlapped like the person had been standing still and shifting their weight. The impressions were deep, as if whoever made them was carrying something heavy or wearing weights. The trail circled the car several times before disappearing toward the open desert. We packed up quickly and got back on the road. The air warmed fast with the sunrise. The road looked different in daylight, emptier, somehow even more disconnected. We drove for hours before seeing any sign of civilization. A gas station appeared near the junction of a larger highway, the first building we'd seen since the trailer. The clerk said the shortcut road we described hadn't been maintained for years, and most GPS maps didn't show it anymore because it ended at private land. He said we were lucky the car made it through without a flat, especially with the kind of terrain out there. While I walked around to refuel, I looked again at the back of the car. The bolts on the spare mount were still there, loose and shining in the sunlight. It was strange how clean they looked, as if someone had unscrewed the tire not long ago and never touched anything else. We drove the rest of the way to Zion without talking much. Even now, when I think about that night, what stays with me isn't the sound or the footprints. It's the missing tire. Whoever took it had time, tools, and enough confidence to do it without leaving a mark anywhere else. They could have been watching us from the road, maybe from the trailer, maybe from somewhere farther out. The idea that someone followed our car long enough to take something off it without being seen unsettles me more than anything I heard that night. We didn't stop anywhere along that road on the way back. No one mentioned the trailer, and none of us suggested shortcuts again. I still think about the footprints though, the way they circled the car, slow and measured, like whoever made them wasn't trying to scare us at all. They were studying us, waiting, and that's the part one can't ever quite forget.